Hi, welcome to the Andy Ramirez Report, video log 15. In this report, I take on the U.S. Immigration Capitulation Act of 2013, aka Shamnesty. First and foremost, I want to speak to Senator John Cornyn and specifically respond to an exchange that we had on Twitter. Senator Cornyn, you asked me if I supported the status quo and the continuation of this status quo. Because I suggested that the Gang of Eights, S-744 as it's called, show up to the floor dead on arrival. Sir, the status quo has never been acceptable, but what the Gang of Eight is proposing is vastly worse. What we have seen at the Department of Homeland Security since its inception and formation is nothing short of a disaster, sir. Take a look at what was created and why. We put all these agencies together. Customs and the Border Patrol. They became Customs and Border Protection. A disaster. Now you have Citizenship and Immigration Service. That's the paper pushers of Legacy INS. The guys responsible for approving visas and applications and what have you. Another disaster. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. Another disaster. You look at all these agencies and everything they're responsible for. And as I've said in testimony before the House of Representatives, when requested to testify by your Republican colleagues in the House, DHS is built to keep information in, to lock down stories, not to tell the truth to the American people, not to tell the facts. So if you think I support the facts where you have managers who have insulated themselves and insulated the lies coming out so that they can protect their lies and keep hidden from the Congress and the American people the truth, I absolutely do not support the status quo. But I even less support this bill, because as bad as it currently is, and let's face it, sir, we are not even enforcing the very laws on the books, making it as worthless as the paper it's printed on today. I don't support what your colleagues are supporting, which is an unmitigated disaster for the people of the United States of America. It is a national security disaster. It is a financial disaster. It is a disaster all the way around. It makes a mockery of the immigration system. It makes a mockery of everything and makes it easier for the ultimate of criminals, terrorists, to come into this nation and terrorize the people of the United States of America. And that, sir, to me is unacceptable. But it's not just that. Look at Legacy INS and look what happened. As bad as it was then under Doris Meisner, and she was considered to be a joke, it was better under her in comparison to what we have seen from a cavalcade of commissioners who have put up with the status quo. Because under the administrations of George W. Bush and Barack Hussein Obama, we have seen it get from bad to worse. At least President Bush listened to the conservatives. And I can attest to that, having been a co-signer on the 2006 letter opposing the amnesty that he and the neocons and others were supporting back then. The same legislation that's even worse today. Unacceptable? Absolutely, sir. I also signed on to this current letter by conservative leaders across America that was submitted to the Senate. And why? Because this bill is dangerous. This bill expands immigration. Senator, are you aware that we're using this 11 to 12 million figure, the very same number that David Aguilar was using in the infamous 2007 musters that took place on tape, taped by himself, in other words, by his flunkies, at the Border Patrol, when he was chief of the Border Patrol, June 13-14, 2007, the infamous Tucson sector magic shows that also went on elsewhere in the country. This is on tape. This is undisputable. In my capacity as a reporter and national correspondent for the Liberty News Network, I've personally exposed the footage. I've personally exposed what he was doing and talking about. So why are we using the number that David Aguilar, as chief of the Border Patrol, used in 2007 today? Why is it that the Mexican government's numbers, sir, used to be 30 million, and now they're using the same 2007 numbers, 2006 numbers of 11 to 12 million? Sir, it's a scam. It's not just a sham, it's a scam. This is Shamnesty 2013. Nobody is being fooled, and especially not the experts. Not the retired legacy INS agents, not the retired Border Patrol agents, not conservative leaders like myself and others. Nobody is being fooled by this. If the Mexican government all that time was using the high number, we know they're fully in bed with this. You have the U.S. and Mexican governments in bed together playing this propaganda joke. You have senators like your colleagues, Senator Hatch, Senator Graham, Senator McCain, Senator Flake, Senator Rubio, who have all been standing lock, stock, and barrel with the Democrats and passing out watered-down legislation that loosens up border security as it exists today. We're not going to get the status quo. We're getting less. So how is this the status quo? We're going to get less than we already have on the books. That's not acceptable, Senator. We have also seen the expansion of civil rights abuses that can be done against our law enforcement officers, especially Border Patrol agents. I know you well remember the case of United States versus Ramos and Compián. I know you well remember the case of United States versus Gilmer Hernandez. But let us not forget the cases of United States versus David Sipe, Gary Brugman, Rob Rhodes, Stephanie Moore, Chito Diaz, and others who were prosecuted, while infamous U.S. attorneys like Johnny Sutton and Michael Battle thought it was acceptable to go after U.S. law enforcement officers while protecting illegal alien dopers, human traffickers, visa overstayers who were actively committing crimes. Let's go back to Alderet de Davila. He didn't just commit a crime initially. He continued to commit crimes while under immunity, Senator, as you well remember, in the case of U.S. versus Ramos and Compián. And now they're talking about expanding civil rights? Senator Leahy, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and others have talked about illegal alien civil rights. I guess nobody's ever heard of the case of United States versus Verdugo Urquidez and what the late Chief Justice Rehnquist had to say on the subject. Sir, that was done in 1990. I suggest you look it up. United States versus Verdugo Urquidez. Easy one to find out, and it's stated pretty clearly where the Supreme Court stood on that. But we're talking civil rights. We're also talking social engineering in this legislation, which is why former Congressman Colby was testifying. No, sir, this is not status quo. This is further watering down and opening it up to far more. If we're looking at 12 million, we're really looking at upwards of 50 million with the family reunification and every other rewards program. How about the status quo of the ombudsman or civil rights office that they have access to as illegal aliens? What about our law enforcement's rights? What about when they're assaulted, when they're shot, when they're rocked, when they're maimed, when they're murdered? Brian Terry's name escape you, Senator? I would hope not. What about all of our people who getting killed on our side of the border? You ever hear of the story of Victoria Hope? I talked about her in my testimony in San Diego, California, before the Foreign Affairs Committee back in 2006. Look it up, Senator. Her case defines why we should never enact anything like this, why we should never have open borders. And furthermore, the traffic of 10 to 15 years ago hasn't been like that in 10 to 15 years. The borders are run by drug thugs, dopers, cartels, alien smuggling organizations, and most likely terrorists. The most dangerous vermin on the face of the earth. And that's who we're going to open our borders to? That's who we're going to further water down the responsibilities of the agents at the United States Border Patrol and Customs? I don't think so, sir. I think what we need is stronger legislation, such as your colleague, Senator Cruz, sponsored in his amendments, as well as Senator Grassley, as well as Senator Sessions. They put up far vast better legislation than what has been adopted by the Committee on the Judiciary. No, sir, we have a disaster. But you also need to understand this in my final point here. Several weeks ago, I did an exclusive story for the Liberty News Network, which was also picked up by the New American Magazine. The Border Patrol, in their infamous, I don't know what you want to call it, nonsense that has gone on for years under David Aguilar, not only as chief of the Border Patrol, but as he continued to ascend up the chain of command to become acting CBP commissioner. They put out a slide on the internal closed-circuit TV within the Tucson and San Diego Border Patrol sectors, and I'm sure elsewhere, that had the slogan, "Honor First." An agent's strength is defined by more than muscle, and underneath that was the word obedience, broken down by syllable, pronunciation, purpose, and the following: quickly and cheerfully carrying out the direction of those who are responsible for me. You know what, sir? Those directions have been so bad since David Aguilar became the chief of the Border Patrol back in the summer of 2004, and insulated all these years by brown-nosed lackey monkey boys, as they're known inside of the patrol, that I can't even fathom why anybody would want to consider following those orders that are illegal for the most part to begin with, as my testimony will discuss, as I've shown how they have failed to implement strategies basically public law enacted by the United States Congress that the parent department, Homeland Security, has failed to implement. But it's not just that. Let's look at, there was finally a response in an article at the New American Magazine on this. And it was stating specifically, Senator, a number of questions that was provided to them. You know, Bill Brooks responded that this information display system slides are meant to communicate important and useful information to personnel. This example falls short of that criteria and has already been removed. But he failed to answer the following questions. Who approved the obedience slide? Is it from DHS, CBP, or some other agency, or perhaps even the White House? Remember, nobody in government does a thing without higher up authority. You can damn be certain, sir, that somebody from the White House approved this one. Are such messages being used in other DHS components? How does DHS respond to criticism from Ramirez and agents about this message? And yes, there was massive outcry within CBP and DHS about the obedience slide. Does DHS consider this type of messaging to be appropriate? Are there any exceptions to obedience? And what happens if agents do not quickly and cheerfully carry out the direction of those who are responsible for them? Can you answer that, Senator? Because I sure as hell can. They are terminated from their positions with extreme prejudice or prosecuted by the United States Attorney's offices on bogus, bullshit, trumped-up charges, Senator. I have been documenting this going back nearly a decade now. That is the pattern. They do the same thing to whistleblowers. I know everybody wants whistleblowers to come forward, but then they go and they look into the agencies. Somebody higher up at the department or at the top of the agency, such as a commissioner, will call and say, hey, do we have any investigations going against this officer or agent? And if there's a response of negative, then they trump them up, sir. I've witnessed and documented for far too long this kind of garbage. Status quo, you ask? Hell no, Senator. In fact, let me add one other thing. While you're bringing in every illegal alien, lackey, supporter, and contributor, why don't you bring in other experts like myself who aren't afraid to tell the truth, to testify before the committees? I'll be happy to do it. I'll go under oath. You consider this right now to be sworn testimony, Senator, because that's exactly what you're getting from me. Facts, not lies. Your bill that your colleagues are supporting, S-744, should damn well arrive dead on arrival, Senator, because it is not acceptable. It is, in all what it is, unacceptable. The status quo is not acceptable either, but it's better than what's being proposed today, which is a disaster for the people of the United States of America. And one thing finally, Senator, if we want to really start with doing something, let's do something about the laws on the books. Let's clean the rats out of DHS and each agency, as we need to do at DHS, DOJ, and state, because it's clear they're not trustworthy. As the scandals Fast and Furious, Benghazi, IRS, and the wiretaps, among countless others, should have proved by now. And lest it be forgotten, let us not forget the George W. Bush's biggest scandal, which was ignored. And it took place in your own state by the Western District of Texas U.S. Attorney Johnny Sutton, the infamous House of Death case, sir.